Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the 2022 first episode of Desert Valley City Talk. This is Eric Bruen. I'm the mayor for the city of Ridgecrest, as well as the CEO for Desert Valleys. And Amanda's out today, so I get the duties of introducing our first guest for the year, which is Mr. Dave Janiec. He is the executive director for the China Lake Alliance. And thank you for being here, Dave.
Pleasure to be here, although you're not quite as beautiful as Amanda. So.
No, I'm not nearly as attractive, and I intentionally made sure that it was Janice. I will make sure, but I'm probably going to do it once during the show just for my own humor.
We'll watch it.
Dave has become a close friend and ally, especially over the past year. For everyone out there, we started City Talk as an opportunity to bring in different people from the community to share the stories and what's going on and how these things affect our community, from per diem to the water issue to how can we get around to greater parks and rec, and today we're going to be talking about redistricting. And for everyone out there, if you want a process that's unpleasant for a year to get involved with, next year, in 2030, when redistricting comes along, we'll be happy to take your volunteer hours.
Absolutely, and we need them. The community needs to be aware and involved every 10 years when this goes on.
So the process for redistricting, as we understand it, occurs after the census.
Right.
And 2020 being a unique year in its own right, we had a census at the same time. And so after the census is completed, a process has been established by the state in which they take all of the new data, they massage it, they crumble it, they slice it, they dice it, and what is supposed to come out of that is the California Redistricting Commission and a non-political process in which the areas of the state that make up the congressional, state senate, and assembly boundaries are redrawn to appropriately reflect the communities of interest and the populations that reside within it.
Right. But take a step back. A little bit more history on this is, as you're all probably aware, at least those of us that are seasoned citizens, the redistricting has been done every 10 years, always. But the California Redistricting Commission, Citizens Redistricting Commission, came into play in 2010 for the first time as a result of a proposition. Before that time, basically the politicos did it, and they were very knowledgeable of their districts, of course, and they did it each year, and that is still the way the supervisors do it in Kern.
Correct.
They themselves do it. It's a very public process. They have multiple meetings, just like the Citizens Redistricting Commission, but it's much more open and awareness, I think, in the general public. Then at the state level, as you said, the federal congressional, the state assembly, and the state senate, and the Board of Equalization.
Board of Equalization.
Which we don't have that much involvement with, but the state senate and assembly, and certainly the congressional district, those are the ones that are completely redrawn every 10 years, potentially, by this commission. And what was different in 2020, and that is this redistricting process that just completed on the 27th of December during the Christmas holiday. What was different about that is California, as a result of the census at a national level, lost one congressional state or congressional district. So we're looking at a situation where we had 53 districts and we had to get down to 52. Now the Senate and the Assembly at the state level didn't change, but that meant that one congressman or woman was going to be out of job, and major changes were likely in the boundaries.
Right, and there starts the process, and we have a process that is going to be taking public comment and input, and we're going to get into the stories and give you a lot of context about everything that happened. But over the past year, I would say there's been three key center wheels to this process for our community. Mr. Janiec is from the China Lake Alliance perspective. A young lady who I cannot say enough about, and I will say over and over again in this broadcast, was just the heart and soul of the engine in terms of keeping us aware, and that was Renee Westellux. And then they came to me early I'm first few weeks that I had taken office and said, this has to be at the top of your list, and you can't back down, through the year on this. You gotta stay diligent.
Well, Renee had history. She was involved with that first redistricting commission in 2020, or 2010, I should say. And she knew how the community had to weigh in heavily. Back then, there wasn't a COVID disruption and delay with the census that really narrowed the window for us to engage. But she and the mayor at the time and the county supervisors.
No mayor then.
Well,
it was just it was a
council appointed.
It was appointed. You're right.
Yeah, there's always been a mayor, but
not elected. But you're right.
Elected council, and then the council subselected.
That's correct. Yeah, I was just thinking about 2010.
Local leaders had to be involved back in 2010, but they had to travel around over to the valley, to Fresno, to Bakersfield, down to Lancaster, to testify as the commission actually traveled around the state, learning about, this is a citizens commission chosen of 15 people from the state, 5 Democrats, 5 Republicans, 5 independents, supposedly. And they are not familiar with the state. A lot of them aren't.
No, they're familiar with their individual areas.
It's a huge state.
Yeah, I was saying, let's not forget. I mean, California itself is the 6th largest global economy. It covers something like, was it 440 miles north to south or something? Huge. I mean, it is the equivalent size of I think 8 different New England states combined. Exactly. I mean, so you are talking about a very wide swath of area, and as we know here in Ridgecrest, a very diverse and different area. Right. You can't compare Ridgecrest with Bakersfield the same way you couldn't compare Bakersfield with Los Angeles.
Yep. But at least when they traveled, that commission in 2010 was able to see some of that. And, just driving from Bakersfield over to Ridgecrest or Lancaster or whatever, you see visually the big change. Remember the first time you came into this valley, if you're from out of town, and you were probably shocked unless you came at night, in which case you thought it was Vegas. Yeah.
I love how you said the Vegas comment. One of my favorite memories is when I interviewed for the job for Desert Valley's Searles Lake. Then I drove to Visalia from here to see a buddy of mine, and I drove through the 178 corridor through Isabella and through the pass over to the Bakersfield side, as opposed to taking the 58 side. And I remember I was listening to Lord of the Rings and listening to soundtrack music and going, "Oh wow, this is beautiful," and how nice it is. And then my second favorite memory was when probably the first month I'd lived here, and I came off of 395, and you have no idea what's there, but right at the top of the hill, you hit the light stream, and it's just like, that's home. And I still remember that years and years.
Well, I came here in 78, and I came with the Navy, and I had a sponsor that I called and said, "I'm coming, tell me about this and whatnot. I have orders in." And he said, "Okay, first thing is, if you have a family, a wife especially, don't come in the daytime, come at night and drive up north from 395 and come in South China Lake Boulevard and look at the valley, and it'll look
so much bigger than what it is.
And it won't be as big a shock as the next morning."
That's funny.
For your family.
That is an absolute true statement.
And that stuck with me, and it's still true to a certain
degree.
It is
an absolutely true. That's very funny.
But I love the place.
But we love Ridgecrest, and so kind of what happened is we knew that COVID was going to mess with the data. We knew that there was going to be a very strong and concerted effort going on over these boundaries, and huge kudos to Renee. She got mobilization started real early, and so over the last year we've been working on this, and it came to its sudden and adventurous end the week of Christmas.
Of course.
2021, because of course, we don't have any other priorities during this time of year. But I think you said the 27th is when they finalized it.
That was when the secretary signed it. I think the final vote was either
23rd,
the 22nd or 23rd. It was, Christmas week.
Oh, yeah.
And they were having all-day meetings, into the evening, 10 p.m.
Oh, yeah.
And Renee was watching every minute of those because their schedule was non-existent. and they violated it all the time, and we could come up at any moment.
Yeah, it was literally imagine a conversation where you have a community of interest like ours where we're watching very closely, and we'll talk about some of those priorities we were watching for. And you had, okay, well, we're going to take a break. And literally the immediate next word out of the next break was, well, I want to go back and talk about District 20. And you had to be literally on the fly ready. And then no public input in those moments, just their back and forth commentary, but you have to be prepared to react.
Right.
And I was telling the story on the dais. I was on hold for 4.5 hours on one day. I think there's YouTube videos of me trying to call in on one during a council meeting.
And I think that was a 20-second. Just for reference to
the 4.5 hours was the 20-second.
For your viewers' reference, Eric said District 20. That's our new designation.
That's our new congressional district.
The old district, which we still currently have until the next election, is District 23.
23rd.
And that's part of the other certification process that takes place. The Secretary of State certified the results of the commission on the 27th. And then there's a 90-day period after that to follow up that for any legal action or that kind of thing. And if nothing is heard, then it takes effect. But practically speaking, it doesn't really take practical effect until the primary.
June primaries, right?
Well, the June primaries, and then obviously November at the
election.
federal level elections. So that's.
But even in the June primaries, the primary runoffs will, congressional runoffs, those will all happen based on those new lines.
Right. And the new lines were, although California overall lost a seat, we still, our numbers grew. So they, by virtue of having lost a seat and very slightly growing in the state overall, they had to realign the districts. One of the things they had to factor in that really became problematic in that last week was that they had to meet a certain number of citizens in each district. Plus or minus 1%. So anytime they changed the boundary,
you threw off population numbers in another area.
And exactly. And guess what? This is one of our vulnerabilities, and will be a vulnerability again in 2030, is we are on a boundary and always have been for several districts.
Yep.
Number two, we're rural, which means we have a low population count compared to the rest of the district. And so it's easy for them when they move the lines in the very end game. Oh, we just need
useful
to move.
pawn.
Yeah, we just need to pick up 30,000, versus 150,000 or whatever. That's why what happened in the end game was so critical.
Oh, yes.
And they changed it 4 times in the last week.
Yeah, easily. Yeah.
I mean, 4 times. The last version being the 4th, the one that.
Okay. Yeah, I knew the 3, but that makes sense. The 4th one.
Yeah, that was the 4th.
And I mean, just imagine that we'd spent a year of work prepping, communicating, and I'm just gonna, again, context for the public to understand everything that happened. I mean, we got ourselves mobilized. We reached out. We talked to. We invited commissioners here. Commissioner Anderson came to one of our council meetings. It was very important because then she got an opportunity to present information to the public. We had an opportunity to get the public involved. We had an opportunity to get our stakeholders involved, like the Chamber of Commerce, city staff, Channel Alliance, IWEDC, these stakeholders involved. And then, they finally reached the point that they said, we're going to start taking public input, which essentially they spent I don't want to sound bad. This is public record. I'm not intending to say good or bad, but they finally got to public input and comment probably around about the end of September.
Yeah, right in September. And some of that was not their fault.
No, of course not.
They were given the data way late because of COVID delays. Everybody's aware of that. But that public input from every key element in the community, be it public safety, be it medical, the schools, the college, the school districts, et cetera. Other groups, nonprofits.
I think we had about 14 different groups.
We had, I think,
in that big. First
we
round.
had 16. We had 16 original folks testify before the committee before they got into this end game in the last month.
Yeah, I meant that middle game.
Yeah,
and that's what I'm trying to walk them through is how this all played out.
Exactly.
I mean, we were engaged, we were aware, we knew we had to advocate. Huge word to the public. You guys, to the citizens of Ridgecrest, if you don't think advocacy is absolutely critical and important to your well-being, please go back and listen to this all over again a second time when we tell you some of the possible negative ramifications we were struggling with. But just think about the idea that advocacy for these relationships is what ensured that we received the $3 billion base reconstruction. These are the things that will help ensure that we continue to work with Congress and with our elected officials to solve our water issues. These are the things that ensure that the future of our community and the relationship we have with China Lake maintains strong and vibrant and healthy to create a population of a workforce. This is advocacy in action. And that's why we brought it to you. That's why I started off with it, because I think advocacy in action is something people don't understand. And we do it every day, but this is what it was. This was absolute advocacy in action. And thank you to those 16 stakeholders who got involved with us. We communicated with them. We asked them. We said, here's what we're looking for. Please get involved. And we identified, and I'll let you kind of say, there was a couple things we identified right from the beginning that we wanted to protect. And I'll let you share them. I could tell them, but I'll let you
Well,
go.
the key to it's actually a vulnerability of ours. We're a small community, I said. We're rural, and we're on a boundary. And our number one employer provides and contributes roughly 85% of our local economy. So as the base and the Navy go, we go.
Yeah.
We've made attempts to diversify. We have in many ways, but that is the situation. And from that standpoint, it makes us very vulnerable, because the Navy base is a research and development base. It is famous nationally and internationally, but it's not well known and understood, even in the defense community. Most bases are training bases or operational bases around the country and around the state. But Edwards and China Lake both do similar things. Edwards has a bigger test focus, but they do some research too. And China Lake does primary research and development, but they also have a testing role. And it is necessary at the federal level for their different funding streams that support those kind of bases.
Okay.
Different funding streams, different encroachment issues, a lot of different employment issues, hiring. The workforce is
Not a civilian workforce versus military
almost
workforce.
90%,
Yeah.
and living off base. Many of the major training bases that most people are familiar with from the national news have a huge population of military, and some of the families live off base, of course, but it's not 90%.
Yeah, it's some, it's not 1 out of 10.
So it's important at the federal level that you have continuity and representation at the congressional level for the unique mission. And that ties to also in the region, the east side of the Kern here is an aerospace center pretty much for the world. Edwards, China Lake, Mojave Air and Spaceport, with what they've grown to be, are huge, and we're partnering with across the mountains with Bakersfield and CSUB and a number of the entities over there. We have a part of the B3K Better Bakersfield and Boundless Kern Prosperity Initiative that we're all working together to build the aerospace economy up on this side of the community or on this side of the mountains and link it to the west of us, because that is the future with oil going down and ag under threat from the same water issues. But those made it critical that we have federal representatives that understand us. And we have to have the state assembly and Senate, and then at the local level, the supervisors.
Agreed.
So that's why, as executive director of the China Lake Alliance, one of my jobs is advocacy for the Navy mission at China Lake and its workforce, which resides out in the community.
Right.
So that
was one of them. And so the synergistic relationship between Edwards and China Lake being a critical element we wanted to preserve. Second was highlighting the importance of Ridgecrest remaining in a congressional district that was part of Kern County.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, unquestionably, we are not San Bernardino County. We are not LA County. We are Kern County. Kern County proud. We've been, we remain, and the importance of those synergistic relationships as it relates to natural energy, as it relates to or clean energy, as it relates to tourism, as it relates to the economics of having our sheriff's department, our fire departments,
All the public services.
all the public works and services as they relate on a county versus city level. We identified very early that was a critical element, which was protecting our role as part of Kern County. And then the third was, kind of a simple message, but it was an important one, which was, we have a good district and our community of interest is represented. Leave us alone. It was undertoned, but it was definitely there, which is, you have a good district. You have a district that is balanced, understands, has a balance that it's growing, and protect this Eastern Kern area as a whole. Don't break up these little rural communities into a bunch of little rural bots, as you would call them, in terms of making a population line. Now, you're going to see, unfortunately, that they did it, but it's how much they did and how bad it was going to be.
Could have been a lot worse.
That is the really kind of the punchline of the story.
Well, and with regards to our old lines and the lines we were happy with, the commission itself early on made a decision that they were not going to look at the old lines for reference.
Yeah.
So, I bet they all did, but they would not talk about it publicly. They did not take that into consideration.
Yeah, I think that was I know for myself, my community of interest map I submitted was the exact drawing of the existing 23rd congressional district. Said, this is the map we like, to leave it alone. Didn't work, but we addressed the other two, which was synergies within the county and synergies within the military. And those two are where the wins came. So
well, and to our benefit, the earthquake and the notoriety that came with that, everybody's awareness of what all the services Kern provides.
Mm-hmm.
In some cases, we'd like more, but overall, they do pretty
or
good.
Or cheaper fire department.
And every community we talked about segments of the community that talked and testified before the commission, and it was Kern County Schools is what they're related to, law enforcement, fire, public services, libraries.
Oh, yes.
All that.
And representative groups, not just one person. These were representative groups acting very, very in conjunction. So a little more history. So Jane comes out. We have our submissions, and then we get the drafts, and the draft maps come, and the political games be afoot. And that's what our October and November and right up until Christmas was spent, which was, you're watching maps. Renee, again, I cannot tell you enough how much we appreciate all the hours that you spent listening and giving us feedback, because something would happen and we would get the feedback that same day to be able to react. The first draft maps came through. They were interesting. The next draft maps came through. They were interesting. And each iteration was about protecting kind of our north. I always want to say it's northeast corner of that county and that eastern side of the county as much as we can. And we had it preserved literally up until a week before, maybe what was 4 days before the 22nd or something like that. They make the move. And so I'm gonna have the map if I can bring the map up.
Let me shape that or set the stage a little bit more. They actually came out with a draft map before
congressional.
A first draft map well before December, and then they were opening it up for public comment.
October,
yeah, and there were. We knew we had opposition to that draft map and to our testimony, not from anybody in the community, but from people outside in 3 areas. There were well-organized, well-funded groups, particularly over in the San Joaquin, that wanted to separate us from Kern and put us either, there were 3 options that had been discussed at the state level, put us either with San Bernardino and the deserts east of us, or LA, and the third one was they were creating one district of mountain watershed from the border with Oregon all the way down to here, and it would be a thin slice right up the Sierras.
It was. If you can imagine, we all know what California looks like, kind of, this hook shape. It was literally the largest district you could imagine. It was 300 miles long, or something to that effect, if I remember right.
So we had people testifying from each of those areas: San Bernardino, L.A., and a mountain area. A lot of those were from the San Joaquin testifying for the mountain area to establish that. Nobody from East Kern was testifying that they wanted to go with those options. Nobody.
Right. Yeah. Again, I'm going to be very careful because I have lots of very strong opinions. Dave will tell you if I get off rails, I'm very strongly opinionated about the Redistricting Commission. But the fact is that this process had a lot of advocacy and advocating and political involvement from the get-go. Well-funded political involvement.
They were watching every
A lot of
meeting.
people talking on behalf of us, too. That was one of the important messages. I think it was right around it was Veterans Day when we were crafting that. We're not going to tell them they're wrong. We're going to tell them you need to listen to the people who live there, not the people who are telling the commission what the people that live there want.
Well, and Eric, you did an excellent job of pointing that out to them without being, in their face, but reminding them that all the testimony they had was the opposite of what they're hearing from people outside of our area.
Right.
And seemingly, as they discussed it, they seemed to respond
They
to
seem
that.
to respond to that.
Whether it was L.A. or San Bernardino or that mountain.
Every single time they were making changes, it was not us that was recommending it. It wasn't our coalition, and that was thank you for that. I appreciate that. It was a real important point. But this is an example. There were all these little strategy moments, and I think I testified 5 times in front of the commission, and so a couple other people that did multiple times. But I mean, the whole key was we constantly had this positive message. So because time, I don't want us to miss out on Assembly and Senate and those things. So this is congressional, and I have up here, Nick, if you want to snap that real quickly. So this is your new 20th California congressional district map, and if you have ever heard the term gerrymandering with lines, and don't believe that this possibly represents the idea of gerrymandering with lines, I would like to enroll you in a Rorschach class.
That looks like the abominable snowman typing on a computer keyboard facing the
wrong directions. And what happened essentially here is we have we were working all the way up until those last few days with a map that kept this Kern County border intact, and that included a couple, obvious, real important communities: Cal City, Boron,
Mojave,
portions of Mojave, and that's what's so funny is literally the last week, in order to make population somewhere else, this great big old shark's tooth kind of appeared out of nowhere. But the problem was that the first shark's tooth that was drawn didn't stop here. It reached all the way down here to the LA County border. And, bottom right, full screen. Okay. Is this shark tooth right here? And that's when things got really interesting, because if they had sliced this all the way down as they were proposing, it would have cut off Edwards.
And that was in 3 of the 4 options.
That was in 3 of the 4 options.
They considered that last week.
Yep. And a lot of people would say, well, why is Edwards so important? And I want to let you just kind of, well, actually, we already talked about the synergies, but the bottom line is that these are research and development bases. And we went to them in the nth hour and made that case. These are synergistic military bases with synergistic relationships that have worked for years together.
They require knowledgeable representation. When Eric says they work together, those 2 bases together with Fort Irwin control 1/8 of California's airspace, with restricted airspace that goes south of Edwards and extends well up to Mammoth, where we do flight testing and they do flight testing, and so we manage it. Fort Irwin is a part of that triumvirate, but they're a training base. So China Lake and Edwards are the primary development and test research bases. And as I said, that's unique knowledge to represent us, especially at the federal level.
So so this is where the shark tooth came in, and I want to thank the people in Cal City, thank the people in Boron, thank the people in Rosamond and Tehachapi and Ridgecrest. In those last few days, we definitely got people out advocating on behalf of Edwards, advocating on behalf of Ridgecrest, and advocating actually for their communities to be included, which at the end of the day, they didn't succeed, especially for Cal City, which is really disappointing. I got to say, I don't know how they look at Cal City and say, you're more San Bernardino than somebody else is, and really say that it makes any sense when you talk about county resources.
Yeah. Now, Eric, you went over pretty quick there how we got those folks involved, and a lot of folks out there may not be aware that redistricting was even going on because it really wasn't covered in the media.
No, it wasn't.
And you had to be aware that the state is doing this each 10 years and how to get connected with them, because there are only a few articles that appeared every now and then in none of the major media. So we already have relationships established up and down East Kern and into Kern that we've worked together before. We know folks. One of the ones is the East Kern Economic Alliance, which just met last week
We had a chance to host
in
them last
Ridgecrest.
week. Yep.
So we had all those folks as well as the folks from Bakersfield up here. So through that and some of the economic alliances that I've talked about through aerospace, we had a lot of community leader contacts down there and pointed out to them, because there's even tinier communities than we are, pointed out to them what was going on and what was being said about them.
On their behalf.
On their behalf from folks outside the areas. And our relationships were strong enough, even though the website and access, when I say there were 4 options considered at the end, each one of them was a final variant until they modified it. So this was the moving target that they put us under for that last week. Only with the final option did we get Edwards Mojave Air and Spaceport, not the community of Mojave. That's right on that tip.
Right down in this tip area here.
Yeah, and China Lake together across East Kern. That was at the last minute. And the reason they were doing that is because they wanted to take, in the upper left up there, they wanted to pull more people from Fresno into the 20th district, and they had to take population from somewhere. That's where that shark's tooth came in, and that's how it came to be. But it was all about relationships in getting, in over a 2-day period, 25 people from southeast Kern, Edwards area, North Edwards,
Cal City,
Boron, Rosamond,
Yep.
getting those folks to call in and remind.
Many letters, too. Many great letters that were really appreciated.
And I will say there was one other, you maybe soft-sold Jane Anderson's involvement. The commissioner that came out as part of their program to meet locally with folks, she recognized the importance of defense overall in the state, which is often given short shrift in the state. And she actually convened a special session of the commission to talk about the military bases and what kind of coverage they could get. That South San Bernardino option, had we been put in there, had 5 other bases, none of which was researched. Their logistics, training, huge bases, huge populations. And we would have had urban representation, and we would have been a small player in the military pool if that had happened.
And that's hugely important. Hugely important. And keeping these relationships that actually are seeing our base through the reconstruction as well is hugely important, because base reconstruction, in case you guys miss it, it's an incredible amount of work that's going on out there, but it's not going to be done overnight. It's going to take a good 5 years for it to be finished.
Absolutely.
And a lot happens in 5 years. I say this is every 10 years, and we can see what's happened just to political environments in the last 5 years has already been devastating.
Right. Well, the reconstruction out there is roughly $4.1 billion total, 3.3 of which has already been authorized and appropriated and authorized, and they're spending on it. That's what they're working now. One of the things we have to do each year is get the additional monies to purchase equipment that are going in those buildings, laboratory test equipment. And as the buildings get built, that's when you want to buy the equipment because it has a warranty and you don't want it to expire sitting for 2 years while the building's built.
Yep.
So that's one of the things we do each year. So we've got 3.3 and we've got another 800 million coming that we have to watch out for and make sure is in the budget every year. And our congressional reps, in this case, Congressman McCarthy and actually Senator Feinstein, have worked with us in so doing.
Yeah, I say Senator Feinstein and Congressman McCarthy both were huge advocates for China Lake during the earthquakes. Again, to a common question, just throwing it out there, people would say, "Well, what does this mean? Does this mean Kevin McCarthy is still our congressman?" Yes, he is. He certainly is. He'll be up for re-election here in 2022, just like other people in the room. And the simple fact is that I believe he will be running in that district, which would be very good for our community. But we'll have to wait and see what he says. That's for him to decide, not for me to decide. I wanted to highlight two other interesting aspects of the map of infinite boundaries. Is the dimple in Kern, which, if you kind of imagine, if you see the 5 and the 99. Well, last time I checked, that was largely Bakersfield. So what they've done is they chunked out a huge part of Bakersfield to meet the VRA requirements.
Voting Rights Act district,
which came from a lawsuit and will tie back into some of the county aspects. But they already had a lawsuit that was filed and I don't want to say settled, but reached an amicable conclusion in 2018.
That was the county supervisory.
That was the county supervisory seats, and that exposed a lot that they wanted to make sure that they were very cautious around the VRA, because VRA is gone now in terms of that part, but they wanted to be very cautious about the lawsuit side of it. So that's what this Bakersfield button hook is, and then the other one is this long kind of toothy arm out to the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, up there in the upper.
And it's go right. Okay, yeah. This area up here, if you can see it, and what's unique about that is it comes with another
Lemoore Naval Air Station, which, by the way, is the West Coast military jet base with F-18s and F-35s, and that is a base that, although it's an operational base, that is very close relationship with China Lake, because the F-18, all the F-18 software and integration of all new systems and weapons is done at China Lake. That's the principal place for it. And the F-35 is this replacement. They'll be here simultaneously, maybe for another 20 years on the carrier flight deck and training out of Lemoore. But China Lake has an excellent relationship with Lemoore. And they picked up the base. So our new district has 3 military bases, Edwards, China Lake, and now Lemoore in it. As I said, China Lake has a great relationship and understanding with Lemoore. I've already talked to Congressman McCarthy's office about what Lemoore is and what it does, and they're very interested, and he's knowledgeable about a lot of that, but getting all his staff up to speed, et cetera. The other part of that, I've just lost my train of thought.
We're going to talk about Clovis.
Well, that's to north.
that's the button at the top.
Oh yeah,
yeah, and that's.
I'll go back 1 second. The other tie-in with Lemoore, you mentioned water as a critical issue. Lemoore is in a critically overdrafted basin, just like we are. So we have another common interest there. So although we would rather have had just Edwards and China Lake together, that ends up being synergistic, and that was the last minute option that got us put back in Kern.
This is what got us the shark tooth back in.
Yeah.
Or some portion of it back in.
The second to the last variant of that had us in San Bernardino with Edwards.
Yeah.
So
they were slicing down this way down like the 14, and they were cutting all of that over.
Yeah. And so we dodged 3 bullets in that last week by continuous engagement almost every day. And we didn't get what we think was the right solution, but we got all the key critical elements, with the exception of Cal City and Boron, the communities. Their economic engine got the link in, but now they still work on all those groups with us, the East Current Economic Alliance. So we're going to stay connected with them and show them the love that they showed all of us together in this district in this process.
And to be clear, we have a great congressman to the east of us in Congressman Obernolte. And we've been building relationships with him. I've had a chance to meet with him several times, and I think that those types of synergies that we're going to be able to maintain. I feel bad for Cal City and Boron in terms of their
25 letters in the last 2 days, and they were out in the cold as a community. Cal City in particular. And they expressed that
very much in particular
displeasure last week.
Yes, they did, and it's just the idea that we are much more similar communities in a lot of ways, and part of the same county, and that line it is what it is. I can't change it today. I'm not going to complain about it. I'm just going to go, wow.
No, but the end game was moving around a few thousand people. Here in the entire state of California, the last several days were dominated by the Southeast Kern community moving back and forth and dominating the public testimonies. Who'd have thought that? My opinion, it came about because we have small numbers. We are a rural community. The dominant interests in this country and the state break down along urban and rural lines, and we have a smaller voice.
We do have a much smaller voice.
And so it was easier for them to move the lines on the edges, and that's the challenge that we will have at least through the next time the commission meets, because we're right on the edge in rural areas, and those are always going to be subject to gerrymandering.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. You were talking about how the testimonies were, and it just struck me, but being small and being rural, I can just tell you the testimonies to the commission in those last few days were so politically and culturally and racially driven that I think I didn't really consider it before, but I'll bet you an honest voice of 20 people saying, I care about my community. I'm not wanting to talk about the color of my community, but I want to talk about what the character of my community is. Probably resonated pretty strongly, and I think that's a kudos to everybody.
We were well served by our commenters
and how we communicate that. So the other, like I said, the button hook is Clovis, and I shared that in humor is for those of you that remember, one of our board members at the credit union and a longtime community leader, the last one to testify in 2010 was Nathan Ollie when he was the CEO for the Chamber of Commerce. And my best friend and I had fun with it because I called him up after the maps were rewritten and said, well, you're back in my district. As weird as that sounds, 4 hours drive away, but we're now back in the same district again. So there's humor in that, but let's move on. The bottom line is just, again, kudos to, as you said, Commissioner Anderson for taking a role. Renee, we can't say your name loud enough times to tell you thank you. And then more importantly, to all the people that got involved in the communication. You guys made a huge difference, and Congressional was the one at play here. The other two, there's not as much to talk about because of that loss of one seat meant that the game was afoot. And even today, McInerney North announced his retirement, or McNerney. I think I butchered it. But that's the example of what's happening is because as these districts have been substantially changed, it's going to change some of the landscape within Congress. So very important for the community. So the next one was, you want me to do this, Nick, or you want me to? Gotta get out of full screen, and
you're a better man than I am.
And then I gotta close this, and then I gotta go to screen behind it, and we're talking about this. Oh no, what'd Nick do? We're trying to use the technology we put in here for once, and that's what's. So we get to the assembly district. So, assembly district, the changes are in certain areas. You can just see the similarities of what we talked about from the other map, and you can see that I talked about that 14 corridor line, and everything being cut off except for us up here in the northeast corner of the county, and Renee had a good story about that. I still remember right after they were closing the first round of public comment, they took comments from the commissioners. And I think she said that it was said 4 different times by 4 different commissioners. Keep Ridgecrest in Kern County. Keep Ridgecrest in Kern County.
And they forgot that in December.
They forgot it. They remember keep Ridgecrest in Kern County.
Yeah.
They just forgot the rest of the county.
With the exception of that one variant.
Yeah, the one variant, yeah. But the Assembly District, again, it's you see that whole shape that's been created again. In many ways, that's representative, again, related to the lawsuits and the VRA. The big difference is that we come up and we pick up this new area kind of in exchange for that lost area of Visalia. And our Assembly districts become synergistic with Visalia in some ways. How's that impact us? Stay tuned.
Well, you noticed just last week, Vince Fong announced that he was going to run for this new district.
For this new district, correct.
So we have a decent chance at having continued representation that is familiar with us and familiar with our issues.
I think that's one of the true positives. I think the other one is that they kept portions of Kern that I would consider very much sisters or brothers to Tehachapi, the Kern River Valley, and it left more of Bakersfield intact inside this district than was previously. Picking up Visalia is interesting. I think it's going to create some new. It may create some new interesting competition for political seats in the assembly that we might see over time. But for now, Ridgecrest is looking like we will be able to retain hopefully the same assembly member. And again, don't underestimate the importance of that in relationships.
And I think it's important in that context to mention one thing, that there was a general impression amongst the Kern observers of the CRC that during this whole evolution for the state Senate, the state assembly, and the congressional district, that there was an attempt to minimize the opportunity of a Kern resident to be, man or woman, to be the elected representative. There was a concerted effort to de-emphasize the influence of Kern, and by all 3 of these groups I was speaking about earlier. And that was several observers over in Bakersfield and here made unsolicited comments that, hey, this is starting to look suspicious.
No comment.
Well, whether it was meant that way or not, it came out because what they tried to move the representation all up towards Fresno.
It moved up towards
and
Fresno
further north.
And I mean, you just saw the congressional map. Us and Clovis are not synergistic communities.
Well, and if we had to go up to Clovis or Fresno, I meet representatives often. You do as well, and that's a much longer trip, and for them and for us, and to stay connected.
Yeah, we become forgotten because in all these maps they don't take into account the immense mountain range that exists right in between the middle of it. On a piece of paper, look, it's just over there. But that doesn't quite work the same way. Anything else with assembly that stands out to you that's substantially different? I think shape's different. Obviously, we know population shifts, but
no, we thought this overall, given all the alternatives, was a positive for us as well.
We still would have loved to have seen Edwards stay as part of the assembly district, but
to be honest, we didn't have a lot of time to concentrate on the small changes that we might have recommended to this. To the Senate and Assembly because of the magnitude of the changes that were taking place in that last week at the congressional level.
Right. And they were very clearly defining some of these new areas that we knew where we could fight and not. Okay, so we'll then look at the state Senate. And so this is our new state Senate district, and largely this is the important comparison that I would point out here is when Dave's been talking about boundaries and county lines. It's amazing how square that bottom corner is all of a sudden, isn't it? Amazing. Look, what does that look like? That looks like a county boundary, doesn't it? Shocking. And you can see the button hook again, or this little button, for the lawsuit and for the VRA side. You catch this little bit of Visalia area where, again, very similar to what they did with the assembly map, and then they extend further up into the Fresno, Clovis, Oakhurst areas, those areas of the mountains. So you can kind of see this from a state Senate perspective. They were able to bring those southeast communities of Kern back into the fold because they needed the population now. And then they tacked on additional population north, traveling into that Fresno, San Joaquin Valley area. There has been no announcement from Senator Shangrove as far as her intentions. I think it's probably a pretty reasonable guess that we hope to see her continue to serve our community and our district. And if that were to be the case, that would be a trifecta in terms of hopefully retaining those relationships. Hugely important. And there's not a whole lot else with Senate. I mean, they did everything we asked to over here on the Senate, and it was real clear that this was never going to change much.
Yeah.
In the process.
That one wasn't attacked as much as the other two.
Right. And but that's an important this little hole is really important on one other discussion, which I didn't put the map up, but we should have it because it is redistricting. It's not the California Redistricting Commission or the battle we went through with them, but the Kern County Board of Supervisors have to go through the same process, which is they're given the census data that shows what their populations are, their breakdowns, and I think the community may have just they heard at the last minute. I think a couple people kind of chimed in and said, "Oh wait, what's this going on?" And then by that point, we had already done a very good advocacy job on crushing that. And that was one of the groups sought a map change substantially for the Kern County.
Three groups again.
Actually
joined forces openly.
Okay. I always go to the one.
Openly against East Kern to force us to go to one district supervisor only for all of East Kern and have really...
And mountains. East Kern and mountains and
actually 3/4 of Kern, 2/3 of Kern almost. And that would have put the center of gravity on the board of supervisors in Bakersfield by a 3-2 or 4-1 margin. So it would have been urban interests.
They were gonna do, and it's hard because I don't have a county map up here, but I'll kind of try and describe is they were gonna take what we were calling this little button hook around this area, and they kind of intended to take all of greater populous Bakersfield and split it into threes and even a large fourth over here.
Yeah, one small rural district with largely
urban population.
Yeah.
And then everything else, which would have been, to put it into perspective, they were talking about a single county supervisor to cover a map area that was, if I remember, something like it was the size of Rhode Island. And it was one county supervisor with county supervisorial staff. And if you know what I mean by that is assembly gets staff, senators get staff, congressmen get staff. County supervisors have one, maybe two staff people that they can lean on. And could you imagine trying to cover all of the population interests of an area that I'm trying to remember what was the stat during it, but imagine an area the size of Rhode Island with one supervisor and maybe an assistant, or two at best. The good part is we got out ahead of that one as well. One again, advocacy. Renee, you rang the bell on that one. You were dead on right again. And that one, we had a much even more direct advocacy because it was really here at the county level.
Well, and fortunately, you mentioned the 2018 lawsuit. That was a county district lawsuit in the federal district court in Fresno. So a county district was sued to redraw the lines. The Board of Supervisors under the Voting Rights Act that made it a federal issue. So it was in the federal district court, Judge Droz, D-R-O-Z-D, in 2018. And the lawsuit was resulted in the slight change of supervisors.
District 1 changed a little bit. Yeah.
Became instrumental in the last election, but it still kept 2 supervisors in East Kern. And so just 2 years before the census, we had a judge approve that. And so what the supervisors did, to make a short story or a long story short, was given that the federal judge had just approved this general redistricting concept in 2018, they redistricted in 2020, the supervisors did, based largely on those previous districts with the modifications for the new census numbers, which were largely grouped in Bakersfield, and a little bit over here.
Minor, but they after a very strong advocacy effort, we were able to ensure that we still have 2 supervisors in the Eastern Kern area. One that's covering the mountains and Ridgecrest, and one that's covering the south, the Tehachapi, and those areas. And
one of the reasons that's key, and one of the arguments that some folks didn't understand is, well, shouldn't we have one person that represents just rural so we really have a full voice on that board? Well, the numbers. If you have one, then you're going to end up with 3.5 to 4 votes that are largely rural. And right now what we have is 2, and some of the other supervisors, the way the maps are drawn, they understand both rural issues and urban issues. Mm-hmm. And if on East Kern, which is very different than West Kern in some ways, in the urban communities, different economies, et cetera, we have 2 supervisors that generally share common interests. They only have to convince one other supervisor in a vote to get 3.
Yep.
So that's why there's a number of other reasons, really good arguments why it's necessary for Kern to have 2 supervisors. That's the one dominant one when you realize how politics works.
Yep, how politics works and just how diverse the county is. I mean,
absolutely.
To compare East Kern County and West Kern County, you are comparing apples to oranges with only one exception, which is the landmass, which is they are all large landmass type industries.
So we're working to integrate Kern. I mentioned on the economic level, and that's where the biggest difference is. Plus the desert versus the San Joaquin Valley. But it's
even though San Joaquin Valley is pretty much a desert at this point too.
Well, yeah, but it has some different. They have air pollution issues. I mean, there's a number of things that are different. While we've argued why we should be with Kern, a lot of that is the public relationships as well as these new emerging economic relationships. That was where you have to look down at a local level at the defense space. China Lake and Edwards, they do a similar mission, and this is where it hurts us. The base realignment and closure, which comes along every now and then. There have been 5 of them. California lost over half of all the bases in the nation because they often don't have local support from the local community and the local political leaders. That was one of the arguments that really held sway with Zach Scrivener, or the 1st district or 2nd district supervisor, whoever that may be, to represent Edwards and Mojave down there, and the 1st district supervisor to represent China Lake to the commission when the commission comes to town. And one of the scoring things they use to determine whether a base is going to close, get new work, or get work taken, mission taken away from them, is community support from these same elements of the community that we've talked about that we had testimony from. And the politicians are key one
Yep.
at the state level and at the county level.
And advocacy for ourselves as a community, advocacy, all of these involvement pieces are all part of making sure that advocacy remains a living, breathing part of our community. It's something I believe in vehemently. I know it's something you're part of. It's part of your task job. And I know we're running, so I'm probably gonna call it. At this point, we've covered all the maps. I'm not gonna talk about BOE, but let me just make sure that I do a couple things. Which is number one, Dave. My heartfelt thanks again to you and to Renee.
You were the front.
I may have been a face at times, but trust me, I got all kinds of information fed to me by great people, and I really appreciate the help. And I always said, there's nothing better than having a team that makes you look good.
Yep. And you did when you weighed in at critical times. You gave them information that turned them.
Yeah, and it's an interest. It's very much. And then the second is to the community is this is politics and this is advocacy in action. This is how good communities become great communities, and it really does start at first and foremost standing up and taking a position and working for the best interests of the community versus your individual interests.
And I would add to that. Positive. It was all positive input. None of this negative attack stuff.
Well, the negative attack stuff is really easy. It's self-satisfying and it's narcissistic, but it doesn't really get us anywhere. And I've been very blessed to have a team of people around me that see that as a goal. And Dave, I can't thank you enough. And Renee, if you're out there listening, I'm gonna make sure you get this link. You're gonna hear it again. Thank you again. And I'm working on something else. I don't think you understand how important you were, or take enough credit for yourself in terms of the importance you had in terms of role. She's the one that pointed us to Jane Anderson in the very beginning. I still remember that conversation. So with that, we're going to call DV Live City Talk our first episode of 2022. Dave, thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
Nick, thank you for your help with the maps. If you want more information, we draw the lines, ca.gov, right? Or .com, .org. Just look, we draw the lines CA. If you want to go and hear any of the public testimony, you want to see what was said, we encourage you to get involved and be active in your community. And thank you again for the time. Thank you for showing up, and we'll see you in 2 weeks' time. Thanks.